But given our growth and the amount of support that the brand management leaders needed, she was going to be that SC getting it done for them, for the calls they're running, for the campaigns they're putting together, for the programs we're doing for franchisors to grow their networks. She's behind the scenes, after the call, she knows exactly what needs to happen. She's going to do the research. She's going to pull the data. So she definitely fit in very well as an SC supporting the DIs.
Welcome to the Franchise Hot Seat Podcast, where we talk about all things franchising. Now, here's your host, Dr. John P. Hayes.
Hey, it's John Hayes with another episode of the Franchise Hot Seat Podcast. So a young employee wasn't failing, but she was in the wrong seat on the bus at Thunderly Marketing, and it was making her sick. But the moment her employer took notice and put her in a role aligned with her strengths, this young employee transformed into one of the company's top performers. Before I tell you more, and before I introduce my guest, here's what we know about companies that hire the right people for the wrong jobs. And by the way, that means you and your company. According to the Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM, 40% to 43% of workers worldwide say their skills and education are underutilized, and up to 76% would prefer a better matched job. In other words, they believe they'd be better off doing something else. Who cares? Well, if you're an employer, you should care, because Gallup studies show only 32% of U.S. employees are currently engaged at work, meaning almost 70% of employees aren't doing their jobs. Employees who are not engaged show up, but they don't light up. They lack emotional connection with their work. They might do their jobs, but they watch the clock and they don't volunteer to do anything extra. These employees go along to get along. They represent lost productivity, loss of creativity, and ultimately negative customer impact. Gallup says engagement peaked in the American workforce at 36% in 2020, the highest in 2 decades. And currently, it's declined to 32%. So if you're at work, take a look around. See those two people in the cubicles next to you? They're not working. Of course, that's assuming you are working, because only 1 in 3 employees is getting the real work done in America. And it's really not funny because, according to Gallup, the U.S. economy loses $1.9 trillion annually because of unengaged employees. Now, those 2 employees I mentioned, they're not happy people. They are psychologically unattached to their work. They might not hate the job, but they never loved the job. They're kind of on permanent autopilot in checked out status. They want more purpose, recognition, even challenge, but the company doesn't provide it. And since they need a job, they stick with the job they have. They're somewhat content, but they're not committed. The danger, they can get worse. They can become actively disengaged, which means resentful, really unhappy to the point of getting sick, and some will become toxic and negatively impact the workforce. The high proportion of disengaged workers suggests lost opportunity for organizations in performance, morale, and employee well-being. But hold on, because this is sounding like a bigger challenge than it actually is. If you're an employer, you might be wondering, how do I fix this? Well, you can fix it. You can get help from Gallup and SHRM. For example, they have surveys that employers can use to identify their unengaged population. And there are certain KPIs to watch, like rising absenteeism, higher turnover, and you can learn about the key metrics, but save all that for now, because the simplest thing you can do is exactly what we're going to talk about today. You begin by asking current employees, what keeps you here? What might cause you to leave us? In other words, expose the disengagement before it becomes resignation. And that leads me to introduce my guest. She's from Thunderly Marketing, a full-service agency specializing in franchising. The company has decades of expertise in franchise lead generation, website design, video production, public relations, social media, thought leadership, influencer campaigns, digital advertising, graphic design, crisis communication, and more. And just to be transparent, Thunderly includes my former agency, which I sold to Bizcom Associates in 1995, which later acquired Brand J and not so long ago rebranded as Thunderly Marketing. My guest is Monica Feid, a founder and COO of Thunderly, based in Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas. She's an active member of the Titus Center Advisory Board. Monica, thank you for joining me.
Wow, thank you for having me. That was quite the introduction, and I'm happy to talk about this topic today with you.
Great. So not long ago, you discovered that one of your really good employees was not happy in her job position. Just give us the background of the story. And of course, we're not going to mention any names.
No, that's fine. Yes, we did become aware of an employee who was not happy in her current position. We had actually promoted her because she had done so well, kind of behind the scenes in brand management, and it was time for her to move up, and the opportunity arose. So we decided she would be great for that next step up the ladder. She, on the other hand, was very happy to report to somebody else on that ladder. So we made an error. We owned the error. And she was a trooper, I will say. We knew she was not happy with the tasks before her, but she showed up and she did what she needed to do, but she wasn't finding joy in her job. 100%.
Yeah. So I need to explain that Thunderly has consistently, even before it was Thunderly, used the DISC profile to better understand employee fit. And I am very biased about DISC. I speak about it all the time. I've used it since the early 1990s. I give it to every student in my franchise program. Any student who I teach, I give them a DISC because I know that that's the best way for them to know how to communicate with me and for me to know how to communicate with them. I know it works really well to the advantage of the employee and the employer. And I only wish more employers would recognize the value, especially in franchising. Because in franchising, we often hear about the failure of franchisees or the underperformance of franchisees. And franchisors will say, we train everybody the same way. What's wrong with the people at the bottom of the list? Well, those are the underperforming franchisees, and there's really nothing wrong with them other than they are suffering from what I'll call disconnect. And that creates discomfort, which will lead to dis-ease, which is not a disease, but unease. And this impacts the negative attitudes of some employees. It certainly impacts the underperformance of franchisees, and it's partly responsible for the disengaged relationships that employers have. So the story of your young employee at Thunderly is a good example of the why of the DISC. Thunderly was going to lose someone who you valued, and one that already cost the company money just to recruit an employee and then to onboard and train and get people accustomed to one another. All of that comes at a cost for an employer. It certainly comes at a cost bringing in franchisees for franchisors. But this young employee, she hadn't settled in and she had a disconnect. So how did it happen? How were you aware of
let me also jump in and say we had a disconnect because at Thunderly, Not only in our current process, we just had our annual retreat. We had the entire team retake the disc and see where they were on the spectrum, because we're big proponents of disc, but we even do it in the hiring stage. So when we are considering a candidate to add to our team, we want to know where they fit on that disc persona. And we've done that with this employee when she started with our agency too. And where we put her in the workflow of our growing organization made total sense for her disc at that time. But then again, when we promoted her, that didn't fit her disc. And we as the employer have had to own that more than once where, okay, we're hiring somebody for this position. They're going to do great. Oh, wait, we're growing and we're adding business and we need somebody in this role. Well, we're just going to pull them over here. And that doesn't work for the employee and it doesn't work for the employer. And we have found that out the hard way.
Yeah.
But I will say too, we've had the luxury of, as we've grown as an agency, because we've tripled in size. And so we've hired for different divisions now. This employee was in brand management, but we also, as you know, John, we have a media relations division, we have a creative services division, we have a digital division, we have executive leadership. We had the organizational structure in place to consider moving this employee over to a division that fit her disc profile from the very beginning. And so once we offered that opportunity to her, which she jumped on, she didn't hesitate. She was so actually excited about that. We owned it. We've been a happy agency ever since.
Yeah.
So.
And in this case, this employee is a high SC, steady, conscientious descriptors on the DISC scale. And I'll take a moment to explain to people that the same professor who created the lie detector test created the DISC. And it's 1950s. Countless people take the DISC every day and get it interpreted by someone who knows about DISC, or they can read about it. It's not very complex. It takes about 7 minutes on average for people to complete a DISC profile. And a lot of people will say, well, I don't think I have any DISC. Well, you do have DISC. It's the DNA of your personality, so you can't get away from it. You're either D, I, S, or C, but you're some combination of all four, but you're primarily high in two areas. So we'll talk about the DI, or the high SC, or the high SI. And it's pretty easy to get these results quickly. And D is the dominant personality, fewer of those Ds than the Is, the S's, and the C's. If you go look at the Fortune 500 roster and you look at presidents of companies, CEOs of companies, they're going to most likely always be D personalities. It's just the way of the world. The I is the influencer. These tend to be politicians, people who really like people. Ds don't dislike people, they like people, but Ds are all about getting it done. Whatever the goal is, the D wants to get it done. No time for talking about last weekend's events or what you're going to do this weekend. But the I's can't have a meeting without talking about themselves and talking about you. They're influencers. They want to get along with people. The S's love people, and they are great listeners. But the S won't take a risk. So you can't expect the S to be out on the front line making decisions because S's are afraid to do that. They want to go along to get along, but not in a bad way. And then the C, which is the conscientious or sometimes called the competent, very detail-oriented. Like the D, they're okay with people, but they don't need people to get things done. The C wants to be left alone, work in their cubicle, get the data they need, the facts they need, go through that information on their own. It might take them days of doing analysis. These are very analytical people. Accountants are frequently C's on the DISC scale. Surgeons are C's on the disc scale. And you kind of like that because you want to make sure when that surgeon cuts you that they know where and precisely why they're cutting and how long to make that incision. So these are the personalities that we all have to some level. So did you recognize, and I know she did a disc, did you recognize early on that this particular employee had that C combination? She wasn't going to be a people person as much as she was going to be more in tune to getting tasks done, although working behind the scenes with people.
Correct. And 100%, we saw that in her disc from day one when we brought her and onboarded her. But we also put her in the brand management division. These are like account executives that are running, accounts very client facing at a higher level. But given our growth and the amount of support that the brand management leaders needed, she was going to be that SC getting it done for them.
Yeah.
For the calls they're running, for the campaigns they're putting together, for the programs we're doing for franchisors to grow their networks. She's behind the scenes, after the call, she knows exactly what needs to happen. She's going to do the research. She's going to pull the data. So she definitely fit in very well as an SC supporting the DIs. Okay.
Yeah.
But when that division grew, we're like, well, she's all trained up. She should know how to be a DI. No, that's not how it works at all. I'm a very DI. I've always been a very DI. And I can look at what we were doing today and say immediately, that was a very bad decision we made. Yeah.
And it was great to hear you say that we owned this bad decision, the wrong decision that we made. How often does that happen? Not just at Thunderly, but in your relationships with other people. People talk, and you can, when I speak with franchisees, I know this is a franchisee who's underperforming. They don't know why. The franchisor doesn't know why, but you pick these things up. It happens a lot in franchising, but how about in your life? How often do you hear about people?
I'm happy to report that doesn't happen very often, at least in the case of Thunderly Marketing. And that's because we make them take the disc when they're in the interviewing phase. And we do not have a lot of turnover with our staff. We've had employees stay with us. They like what they do. They enjoy their job. It's a good cultural fit, and their personality works well with, if you're designing websites for a living, this is going to be where you are on the disc. If you're acting as, a thought leader and helping support, their brand personas on social media, this is where you're going to fit behind the scenes. If you're forward facing and running accounts, this is where you are in the disc. So, our creatives, our brand leaders, our digital, staff, they've been very well positioned based on their disc profile. We haven't made that mistake, thank goodness, too often, because to your point, it costs a lot of money to advertise a position and go through rounds of interviews. And let me tell you, you do not want to make a bad hire, because that's just, you got to start all over. And that's why the disc has been so important to us. And thankfully so, we haven't run into this situation, because I think that we put it front and center very early on.
Now, imagine for our franchise audience, the franchisors who do make this mistake all the time. I actually think it really impacted me the most when I became the CEO at Homevestors of America, the We Buy Ugly Houses brand. And my first day as CEO, I thought I had to really know who the top 10 best customers are, who pays us the most money. And I had to call those people and probably go visit them because we didn't know one another necessarily. And as it turned out, no one on the existing leadership team knew all 10 of the top customers at Homevestors, which was just appalling because I know your 10 best customers. You can't function without knowing this. Well, nor can a franchisor, but unfortunately, HomeVestors, because it was emerging, what was beyond emerging at this point with 230 franchisees, but it didn't have as much professional management at that point. It was still making its way through the journey of franchising. When I got together with the top 10, I learned a lot about them. And I wanted to look at their profiles, which fortunately this franchisor, Ken D'Angelo, the late Ken D'Angelo, had used the DISC profile only because a consultant, it wasn't me, a consultant told him in the building of his franchise in the 80s, you really should give everyone a DISC. And I asked Ken one day, why did you give everybody a DISC? And he said, because the consultant told me I should. But you didn't use it. He said, well, he didn't teach us how to use it. So, but we have it. And they had it for every franchisee who they brought on board, which was just amazing data to have because I could look at the bottom 10, the bottom 50 out of 230. I could look at the bottom underperformers who did not like HomeVestors, who blamed it on us that they weren't making a lot of money. Our top franchisees were buying more than 100 houses a year. And the people at the bottom were lucky if they bought 10, 6 houses a year. So they weren't making a lot of money, and that wasn't making them happy. And of course, franchisees tend to say it's the franchisor's fault. And it was our fault because I realized the people in the bottom 50 did not have D in the first or second position. But all of the top 10 were Ds in the top position. The first position was D. And all of the top 50 had D in the first or second position. And shame on us and shame for other franchisors who don't know this information and just go out and sell franchises. And when we were taking $50,000 as a franchise fee, a lot of money, and putting people through 6 weeks of training, only for them to find out they didn't have the personality to go buy a house. Fortunately, that could be fixed because we could say, bring in, you can hire a D personality. But a lot of damage was done in the process. Do you see this when you speak to franchisees and franchisors? Are you aware of the underperformance? And as you're doing marketing, and not every franchisee will treat marketing equally. They won't get the same results.
Yes. Well, and I'm very familiar with your journey and the D profile with the HomeVestors franchisees.
Yeah.
I can say in 30 years of franchise marketing, I have a front row seat to the American dream, live and in action every day. I see franchisees living the dream. And it's not what you would expect, like, well, they come from a lot of money, they just bought themselves their future. No, I mean, it's across the board, the people that come from all walks of life into franchising, but it is very much drilled down for the ones who are successful. The people that are collecting trophies at conventions, the people that are doubling down on their investment and becoming multi-unit owner operators, the mumbos, every franchisor wants mumbos, right? Multi-unit, multi-brand, because these are the people that know how to run efficient businesses, build great teams, market their services, their product or services very well. That's, you could put any number of franchisor brands on this story we're sharing right now. And the top performers are those DIs, 100%.
Yeah. And in some franchises, there will be differences because if the job of the franchisee is not primarily to sell, and rarely is that the case, but it could be that they're in a different kind of, like in senior care, where there is a lot of selling, but not necessarily done by the franchisee. Franchisees have an opportunity in senior care, tutoring, other similar types of occupations where they can be more of an S. They can also be a C, but they need someone who's going to drive the business. And well, that's the point of what we're talking about, that the DISC will help leaders avoid the mistake of thinking someone is a poor performer or an underperformer, when really they're just in the wrong seat on the bus. And if you change the seat and you work to their strengths, you can make happier employees and you can make happier franchisees. And that's the message today. And Monica, thanks for joining me and delivering the message.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
This was a great conversation.
And thank you also for all of your contributions and Scott White's contributions, Jack's contributions for helping the students at Titus Center. Some cases you're mentoring our students. In some cases, some of our board members provide internships. Thunderly does have an internship. I'm not sure. I think some of my students may have applied for that internship. Jobs that are offered to our students from board members, but just being there to support us in ways that you do. I appreciate that help, and I look forward to more of it as the Titus Center continues its journey.
We've been honored to support it. It's doing an incredible job in educating and preparing students that are interested in franchising. And the wealth of information that they are leaving with. I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years, and day one, they know way more than I ever did day one in franchise marketing.
Yeah, great.
So.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from people, or the students will come back after they graduate and say, I was at an IFA convention and people said to me at our roundtable, how can you be so young and know so much about franchising? Well, it's a result of education.
That's right.
Fortunately, we provide that education not only at Palm Beach Atlantic University, but other universities are doing it as well. And we're happy to see it.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Monica.
Thanks for tuning in to the Franchise Hot Seat Podcast with Dr. John P. Hayes. Tune in next time for more conversation around all things franchising.